Getting our 3D prints to look good so we can use them and show them off, that's the goal. And if you're like me, you're going to tweak those slicer settings until every last line or imperfection's just gone. But what if we intentionally use the wrong settings? Hey everybody, it's Eric again in the 3D printing zone. We all know 3D printing can so often go from bad to good to bad to good with just a few setting changes in our slicer. What may work good on one print may not work on another one. Or maybe the STL has problems. Either way, we want to make sure that we get the best print we possibly can, right? Well, I remember my band director in high school, Mr. Edgar, telling us one time that if you make a mistake, make it big and make it bold. Like the time our tuba player turned the wrong way and marched into the opposite end zone and just left the field. Go big or go home, right? But that can't possibly work in 3D printing, can it? First up, let's see what happens when we only use infill to make a crazy looking print. Let's make sure we start with something that's mostly walls so that we can show off that infill. We can move on to bigger things later. Drop the print in your slicer, I'm using Cura, and change the walls to 0. Then change the top and bottom layers to 0. Next, make sure your infill is around 20% and then choose your infill type. Changing the infill amount can also really affect how it looks. Slice your print, then change your view over to Preview or X-Ray and take a look. What you've essentially done is turn off the parts of your print that makes it actually look like a print. And now you just have the infill left over. And if you have it, Honeycomb's a great one to use, but some of the infills like Gyroid or Zigzag, they make some pretty wild looking prints. Some infill types look better than others, so you're going to need to experiment a little bit to see exactly what looks best to you. So the next crazy thing we're going to try is to make our 3D printer print out into the open air. No support. The first time I ever saw this was actually with this Christmas tree right here. I honestly did not think this could possibly work out, but it did. You can use this on a lot of different things, like hair on a model, other types of trees, or maybe even a beard on your gnome. You're going to want to follow the guidelines from the website where you got your print, but then we're going to make some changes. First, you want to print a lot slower than normal. And the next thing is usually a total mistake in 3D printing. Turn off your retractions. This is intentional, so your printer continues to push out filament when it reaches the end of each branch on our tree to give it that loopy and slightly messy look. PLA worked best for me since cooling is super important in this type of print. I did try PETG. It failed kind of spectacularly. This next type of print is probably familiar to most of you, except for maybe beginners in this 3D printing world. And it doesn't require you to change anything crazy, but you might want to make a few minor adjustments just to get everything to print right. Of course, I'm talking about the awesomeness of print in place. In case you're not real sure what that means, print in place is when your model comes off the bed already put together exactly the way it's meant to be. No gluing, no snapping, it's just there. It doesn't seem possible, I know, that something could be made through a 3D printer that would just come off the bed like that, like this snake. This is one of my favorite things I've printed, and I love this filament. It's actually gold, but it came out looking like wood, and it came off my bed exactly like this, and it has amazed so many people. And I know that your friends and family, when you show them something like this and you tell them that you made it, you're going to amaze them too. This is a great way for you to show off what 3D printing is capable of. And if you haven't tried this type of print before, look for one on the website that has a lot of comments about how well they printed. Let's start easy. Most prints, especially print in place, will have specific instructions on the website where you got it that'll help you get the best print possible. Sometimes these work for your printer, sometimes they don't. You're going to need to experiment. Just make sure you get the best possible print you can. If you're having a problem with your print, double check the settings on the site, but then make sure your extruder temp is at the optimal level for your filament. And then check your walls and your infill. Most print in place won't need supports, or they'll have them built in. So be sure to check that setting. And your biggest friend and enemy with print in place is bed adhesion. One little piece coming loose could wreck the entire print. These type of prints can also point out a bigger problem with the tuning of your printer, like your bed isn't leveled or maybe your E-steps need calibrating. Michael at Teaching Tech has an incredible site that he made for all aspects of tuning your 3D printer. I'll have the link down below. By the way, for all these crazy looking prints before they got crazy, all the links will be down below. And don't forget to follow us and post your prints on our Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok pages. So here's another type of crazy print that will hopefully blow your mind just as much as it did mine. You know all those prints you have hanging out everywhere in every nook, cranny, and shelf? Well, let's put them on a pedestal. Literally. Wyatt, one of our other hosts, came up with this idea while we were brainstorming for this episode, and I just absolutely loved it and had to include it here. The first thing you need to do is print your model with the best possible settings. Then, while you're waiting for your print, go back to your slicer and prepare it again. And now for the fun. Turn off your print. Take away all the walls and the top and bottom layers, and this time, turn off the infill as well. Lift the print up into the air and make sure to orient it with the best presentation in mind. If you have your slicer set to automatically place the print on the bed, you're going to need to temporarily turn this setting off. In Cura, there's a great option called Support Blocker. I use this to block out most of the print, just leaving what I want my stand to touch. You might also need to turn on advanced settings to see all those great support options. But now you can use tree supports, use custom supports, whatever looks good to you. I like tree supports for a kind of organic look, and I set them to be touching the build plate. Play with the settings to get exactly what you're looking for. You'll need to slice and preview after each change just to see what all those settings can do. And all that's left is supports. Be sure to use a different color filament for your stand so that it'll make your print stand out a little bit more and it won't clash with it. Your print should fit into your supports just like a glove, and it'll look like the perfect piece of art it was always meant to be. These incredible, crazy prints are just a few of the things that you may have never thought of doing with your 3D printer. Or if you have another crazy print idea, please let me know. It'd be fun to do another episode with your ideas. I'm Eric, and thanks again for joining me in the 3D Printing Zone.